Hey everybody, it's Marcy from wavesofcommunication.com with my live Q&A coming back on. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I am back on answering questions from parents. And I do have a couple of questions that came in that I'm going to get started with right now. And I don't remember your names, but I'm going to go ahead and dig into those questions so that we can get going. Thanks for joining me back. All right, so the first question is with a little late talker who's using single words but not using combos yet. Her little guy says things like, I got it, but most of the time it's just these 1 to 2 words. So it probably is your child's at the stage of language development that is the labeling. So you have to think about when you look at children and trying to figure out, trying to get them to say more words or tell more of their idea, you have to figure out what it is that you're trying to get them to communicate and provide them the words for it. Because what happens is when a child doesn't expand their words, they don't know the words to use. So if your child's using 2 words for requesting something like want cookie or my cookie, or, you know, usually when they're at that stage, it's just labeling a thing for the purpose to get it. It's not necessarily to describe it or talk about it, and that's always the way to expand language. So if your child is already using 2 words together, in fact, with language facilitation, I always recommend you always model at least 2 words together. So if you are talking about a thing, you know, like phone, you want to always model it with 2 words to start with so that the phone has some kind of relation. It's not just phone, this phone, it's the only phone. Like, you want to always, if you're talking about it, why would you be handling this phone? My phone, watch phone, my turn phone, no phone now. You know, you're going to be always using a single word in context with another one like it. And so the way to expand a child's language is always by adding on other words in your model to get them to that next level. So the first thing you'll do is say the word phone to request the phone, the child to get the phone. Then you'll, you know, if the child does say phone, then you'll hand them the phone because they do. But as you hand them the phone, you want to teach them the words to ask you for it in a longer phrase. Oh, you want the phone. Phone, please, mommy. And I always recommend that kids hold out their hand and you put the thing into their hand whenever they request something. So to expand a child, you always want to go ahead and honor the words that they're saying, but when you respond to that phrase, that 2-word phrase that they use, you respond with understanding, repeat it, and then add another one on. So the child says phone, you say want phone, mommy, if that was a request, or you can say no phone now, not phone time. So that you're using a 3-word phrase, want phone, mommy, want videos on phone. Like, why does your child want the phone? Talk daddy on phone, you know, whatever the reason is that your child wants that object. If they're using just 1 to 2 words, then it's probably going to be a request-based communication that they're using with words. So if your child previously would drag or bring you the phone and hand it to you, and then you understood that they wanted it because they brought it to you, and then you said phone, it's a phone, you told them the word for phone. So now they, whenever you have it or they bring it to you and they want you to turn it on or whatever, they say phone, then you want to expand that, because you shouldn't only say 1 word. Remember, you should say want phone, please. You always model the 2 or 3 words that you think a child should say, or the words that they would say next time. So it's challenging to know in what circumstance you're shifting from a 2-word phrase to a 3-word phrase, but it doesn't matter. If it's a request, turn it into a 3-word request. If it's a description like blue truck, right, then you add big blue truck, look, a blue truck go, blue truck, you know, my blue truck, no blue truck, yuck blue truck, dirty blue truck, you know, whatever. Add on to the words that your child has already said, using a word that they might have in their vocabulary and maybe not be used to connecting it together. And that's also the way that you engage in reciprocal conversation with your child. If they're talking about things, then you're going to add on words to what they talk to. So I see there's some more folks joining me. Thanks so much for coming back on. I think we've got a better connection now. If you have a question about your child's speech and language, post it in the comments and I will talk about it. So I just finished that question that I got on the previous video I tried to do, and there was another question on there as well. And that was somebody who has a 7.5-year-old child who has severe ASD. She said, he, I don't remember who, sorry, didn't get your name, but he has a child with severe ASD who's nonverbal, and she wanted to know, is it apraxia? So here's the thing about any kind of diagnosis at all. You're never going to be able to have a practitioner give you any kind of a diagnostic label. It's unethical based on a one-sentence phrase, okay? But I have done videos on my YouTube channel about apraxia and understanding what apraxia is. And so considering that's what you asked about, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you that there are many, many things that could cause a 7.5-year-old child with a diagnosis of severe ASD to be nonverbal. Many, many things, even though they have an ASD diagnosis. Now, apraxia can happen, but it actually is much, much more rare than it is, apraxia is much more rare than it is diagnosed even. So, so Angela says, thanks for those tips. Great, Angela. You should be able to, if your child's already using 1 to 2 words, you should be able to get some good improvement on language using these strategies to help do it. Just make sure you're always modeling the language that you want to hear from your child at the level they can produce it. Don't be talk, 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 because your child can't imitate all of that. That could be part of what's going on, is your child's only using single words because you're responding to them with la 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 la, and they can't they can only hear one word at a time. They'll pick out the individuals. So that's a really big one. All right, so again, a 7.5-year-old child with a diagnosis of severe ASD can be, again, an entire spectrum. Even though ASD is a spectrum disorder and we're all talking about severe kids, even children who have a diagnosis of severe ASD, or on the severe end of the spectrum, their late talking could be caused by 100 different things, from trauma to motor issues like apraxia, or could be motor prematurity. I mean, you know, there's many, many things that cause that issue. So severe ASD would have a lot of behaviors that go with that diagnosis, and potentially there are behaviors that are getting in the way of your child's verbal speech. So you know that, you know, there are criteria that are necessary for a child to be able to produce verbal speech. And instead of looking at sort of what's wrong, I like for parents who have kids who are late talkers, no matter how old, they could be a 2-year-old late talker, or they could be a 20-year-old late talker. Late talkers are just not talking yet. They have the physiological capability to talk, but there are blockages to them wanting to use verbal speech or knowing how to use verbal speech. So, hey, Neri, watching from Kenya, hello. So glad to have you join me. Thanks so much. If you are watching, please give this video a like. It's always helpful for me to get these things out. And this live Q&A, so you know, everybody, I do every Thursday at 2 p.m. So if you're watching the replay, 2 p.m. Eastern time on Thursdays, I'm always live here on my Waves of Communication page. So if you are in my online course and you have questions, this is the place to get answers to those questions. If you watch my YouTube videos and my Facebook, and maybe you're in my group, my language facilitations group, this is the place for you to be able to ask questions of me directly about your child and your situation. So if you're watching on the replay, I'll be back next Thursday, and you can post a question. And you know, usually I post other things. So if you have a question that you want me to answer, you could always send it potentially in a private message, and I'll answer it on the video. Not guaranteed. The best guarantee is join me live. Okay, so watching from the Philippines, hi I and Bobby Joe and Jenny and Yuri and Trisha and Mary. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody. These videos, like, this is the way for you to get the guidance you need to get on your language facilitation journey. There are 160 plus videos on my YouTube channel. You can go over there and binge watch language facilitation tips. In fact, yesterday I just posted a fab video about using books that's going to be great for parents of kids at all levels of language facilitation. So you'll be able to watch those videos and learn how to facilitate language. It's my goal this summer to get as many of you out there seeing better natural language, speech and language with your kiddos. If you're in my program, if you're not in my program, all of you. It's my mission to help as many parents as possible understand that language facilitation is what's necessary. You as parents have to teach your kids the words that they want to say. No one else is teaching them. The therapists are teaching them the words the therapists want them to say. The teachers are teaching them the words the teachers want them to say. If you're teaching them the words you want them to say, then you're not doing it either. That's why you need to shift over and do language facilitation this summer with me. Hey, Brianna, and so that you can get your kiddo talking. All right, so like I said, your late talker, your 7.5-year-old child with an ASD diagnosis, or your 2-year-old child with an ASD diagnosis, those behaviors, those blockages, those things are getting in the way of your child's natural verbal speech. And then the other thing that is so common with kids who have an ASD diagnosis, especially kids who are older, is that they have been in prompt-based therapy intervention for a big part of their life, and they have shifted 100% into prompt dependence. Some kids even develop prompt-based anxiety, and these feelings of pressure to work and say words that other people want you to say all day, every day, this is the #1 blockage to children saying verbal speech, using natural verbal speech. Because if you're watching this video, you want to see your child using natural speech to request all of the things that they want, to say their feelings, to talk about the experiences that you share together every day, and to tell you their ideas, their feelings, right? Now, these things can't be taught by someone else. Your internal feelings are the things that you have that you need to share as a human being. And your child, based on pictures or prompts, they're never going to have a word that means their feelings outside of you experiencing those feelings with your child. So even if your child is 7.5 and has severe ASD and is doing all kinds of behaviors to communicate, because your child's communicating with you somehow. If they're happy, they're sad, they're upset, they want something, they're finding a way to communicate non-verbally. Most kids who have ASD are super, super smart. And what they have done instead of learning verbal speech is learning their own way to communicate. So your kids in Kenya and Philippines and all of these places that they're trying to communicate with you using all these non-verbal things, your kids don't know how to use verbal speech, because I'll tell you what, if they did, if they knew how, they would use it. And that's what happens when parents do language facilitation. They're proving it all over the world. Parents who start to give up that prompting and show their kids the words that they want to say. So if your child's playing with something, even if they're playing with the phone, you need to be talking about what they're holding, what they're looking at, what they're exploring, and the words that they're going on in their little heads. And when you say those words out loud at the time they're happening, the right words, the right way, at the right time, that's when your kid goes, oh, you're speaking my language. Those are the words I want to say. And then, lo and behold, like magic, they start saying them. They don't want to say the same words over and over and over again out of context with flashcards. They don't want to label 10 fruits. They do it because you clap for them, or you give them a reward, or you tell them they did a good job. They do it to make you happy, not to make themselves happy. But a child who wants a banana and says, banana, please, they're saying banana to get a banana because they're hungry and they want a banana, and the banana's going to make them happy, not saying the word, getting the banana. So they're going to do whatever they can to get the banana. And if words don't work, like they don't know how, maybe they don't like it, maybe they're late talking because they didn't hear speech and they don't even understand what you're saying. Maybe they're not hearing clearly if you haven't checked their ears. All of that stuff you have to figure out, because you have to figure out what caused this late talking in the first place in order to figure out, well, how are we going to solve this problem? Because it's not just a problem of your child late talking, I guarantee, because in order to get through life with your child every day, you have to figure out what they want. You have to guess. So what most parents do, and I'm sure that's what happened with your 7.5-year-old child with ASD, is the parents take on the responsibility to know what the child wants by guessing, by watching the child, by anticipating what they're going to do, by remembering what they did before. And then that's why you try, well, you like this. It's a trial and error. It's nonstop trial and error and guessing, right? Because you take on the responsibility to try to figure out what your nonverbal child wants. And with language facilitation, we give them back the responsibility to communicate it. In fact, this is a story that you'll appreciate if you have a 7.5-year-old nonverbal child. Ben, if you've been watching my page, you've seen me talk about Ben. He wrote a book with his mom, and he talks about how autism is his superpower. He has amazing perfect pitch hearing and a super perfect memory, but he doesn't have really great conversational communication skills. And I'll tell you what, Ben didn't talk until he said his first words at 5, and didn't even get conversational until he was 7.5. And what happened was his mom, the light bulb finally went off, that here she had a 7.5-year-old child who was only saying single words sometime, and she was 100% responsible for understanding his needs. So she had to teach him how to talk and how to say the words that he was memorizing, and that's how she understood all of the knowledge he had. But she didn't even understand how brilliant he was until he was 7.5, because he didn't talk. He was nonverbal. And what's really cool about this is I asked his mom if I could talk to Ben, because now that he is talking, I wanted to ask him why. Why didn't he talk? If he had such fabulous speech skills, this kid's blah, blah, blah. He's able to recite a whole BuzzFeed video that he memorizes after the first time he watches it. He can tell you facts about North Korea and grocery stores and all this kind of stuff, that he has all of this stuff inside. He had it all inside. And I asked him, and I said, why, Ben, didn't you say words until you were older? And he said to me, my mom just knew. My mom just knew. And I thought, this is huge, right? Because it's happening from the time kids are 2, from the very first time. The very first time you realize that you have an epiphany, my child's late talking. And then what do we do for our kids when they're lacking something? We step in and help them. We make it easier for them. If your child is late walking, you make him easier. If your child's an eloper and they run away, you keep them in a push seat so they don't run away. You make the environment easier for them and for you to get through life. If you've got a child who's got a lot of behaviors, who's very unregulated and just doesn't know what to do with themselves in life, you are constantly problem solving. And what happens is when you find yourself in a constant situation of problem solving, there's no new teaching going on. It's just survival skills, right? So years go by and you're solving problems and solving problems and solving problems, and now you have a 7.5-year-old who you've been solving problems for their whole lives. And what this mom found out, she did it on her own. She didn't do it with me because Ben's 13 now. And she figured out how to do this back when he was 7. And she learned how to provide him with the words, how to watch and follow his lead and look at what he was interested in. Because if he wasn't interested in something and he was nonverbal, and he was getting to be a big kid, 7.5, right? He was probably steamrolling her. Every time she tried to do something that, you know, was teaching like or word like or involved language, and he was a nonverbal kid, he left. So she threw up her arms and she said, I'm just going to do what he likes. I'm just going to go with what he likes. And that's what she did. And that's when it started clicking. And he started memorizing stuff, and he started talking stuff. And as soon as he felt safe to be able to say what was on his mind, he did, right? So here's the thing about late talking. It's not all about the child. It's not all about even what's physiologically wrong with them. In 99.9% of the cases, there's things that parents are doing that actually enable their child to need them. So here's a way to know if this is going on in your house, is if your child is relying on you to interpret all their messages to the world, you are their interpreter. Oh, he wants this, he needs this, he thinks this, oh, he's not ready, he doesn't like that. If you find yourself doing a lot of that, you are missing language facilitation opportunities, because you have accepted the responsibility as a parent to communicate your child's feelings for them. He doesn't like that. He's not into it. No. He doesn't like loud noises. He doesn't like whatever. And you do that because the way he communicates he doesn't like it is by a meltdown, right? So in the moment, if you were language facilitating, you would show your child the words they need to help them in that moment when they're afraid of the situation. So you don't have to have a tantrum. You don't have to have a meltdown. All you got to say is, no, thank you. And it seems like a real easy thing. Oh, really? All I got to do is say that? Well, you don't have to do it one time. And of course, you have to get your child to listen to you. But what Ben proved, that parents are proving all over the world, is that when they teach the kids the words that the kids want to say, they say them every time. But as soon as in fact, it even happens like this in my program. I have parents who start out doing language facilitation and their kids get better engagement. They start holding their parents' face and looking at them and saying, oh my goodness, you're saying the words that are in my head, finally. And they look and they're watching, and they're not talking yet, but they're watching. And they're listening because they've always been listening. But now you're saying their words. And when they start to feel that, oh my goodness, you're listening to me, you want to know what I'm going to say, you empower your child to use the words that are in there. But they don't know how yet, right? So it starts with not, just following their lead and saying the words they want to hear. And then after that, you move forward and you start to teach them the words for the things that they're doing when they want to share experiences with you, because they feel it's safe to share experiences with you when you're wanting to talk about what they're interested in. That's what happened with Ben and Angela. She said, I quit. I'm not doing these speech prompting stuff anymore. She stopped the therapy in her house for a minute. Her kid had immune problems, so she couldn't take him she was like, I'm just done. I'm just going to follow his lead and chill. And that's when the kids started talking. And that's when she started doing, following and doing his things. So this is what language facilitation is. It's not rocket science. It's not cutting edge even. It's been working forever. But the problem that happens to most families of late talkers in 2019 is that the first time you realize that there's an issue with your child's talking, you start to fix them instead of show them how to do it from the beginning. You start to band-aid it with flashcards and sign language and picture exchange communication, when you don't understand first, why is your child late talking to begin with? Because it could be from anxiety, it could be from pressure, it could be because they didn't hear, It could be just they just didn't hear and now they need to hear again. And that's what happens when you have to figure it out with late talking. So, all right, here's a question. Bobby Joe says, I'm confused because the therapists say my son is a rare case. They say even though he can communicate, he's using all scripting to do so. So he's still being classified as nonverbal. Bobby Joe, right. Because verbal speech has meaning behind it. Otherwise, it's just talking behavior. Now, here's the thing. If your child is only using, Bobby Joe, echolalic speech, scripted speech, that's what he's learned as a behavior to get what he wants. So if a child is using the I want blah, 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 that means that the way your child learned talking, okay, he didn't learn language, he learned talking as a behavior. So it's the same as to get the cookie. Your boy has learned to say, I want cookie, or I want cookie, please, or whatever is scripted to get that thing met. And it is literally the same as if he was taught to do this. And every time, in fact, one of the clients in my program just posted a thing that her son learned to get tickles by touching his nose, which I think is ridiculous. I'm sorry. You don't teach a child to communicate things with nonverbal, unrepresented language. Like if you're going to use signs, at least use a sign for that's a representative language, because unfortunately, every time that boy touches his nose, the only people that are going to tickle him are the people who know that this means tickle in that little boy. And that's not language. That's a behavior to make something happen. That's like teaching your dog to ring a bell to go outside. He's never going to go outside if he goes into a new place without a bell, right? It's teaching a child a behavior to say a word to make something happen. And that is the first way that a lot of kids are taught to talk. And that is talking as a behavior, not talking as language. So guaranteed, Bobby Joe, your son is using nonverbal communication to communicate what he really wants, because the scripted language isn't cutting it. And if he's scripting videos from TV, it has meaning for him, but it literally is the same as dragging you to something. He's just trying to get your attention and have you look at him to demonstrate that. And what you need to do is you need to stop prompting and using scripting language altogether. You need to stop it. You need to stop scripting, because then he's going to be like, how do I get what I want? And you're going to be like interpreting the behaviors that he's using with unscripted language. So if he wants you to get up out of the chair, you say, get up. If he wants you to go outside because he's banging on the door, you say, open the door. If your child is choking the dog, say, ouch, don't choke dog, ouch. You know, I mean, the thing is, you have to say the words that are going on in your kiddo's head for them to understand. That's why words work. They don't work to get something happen. Whenever there's an exchange required to say a word, it's not language, it's a behavior. So language facilitation is what you need to do, Bobby Joe, but you're going to have to unteach prompting by using so much exposure to the language that's already going in your child's head by looking at it from his perspective. So you need to look at the world through your son's eyes and figure out when he says, Old MacDonald, what does he mean by that? And give him those words. That's how you shift it out of it, right? So Brianna says, follow her lives, watch her YouTube, soak that info in, such a huge help. Mwah. Brianna taught her kid to talk. She's not in my program. Trisha says, we are trying to fade out speech prompts to transition to your program. Yes, Trisha. What about tactile cue prompts? Because Trisha's bought my thing. What about tactile cue prompts for motor planning issues? That's a really good question. We are dealing with some consistent speech sound errors, and he usually corrects with subtle ones. All right, so the thing is, Trisha, the prompts are okay for corrections after a child is already using natural verbal speech. So this is why parents get confused about prompting. Remember, if there's an exchange that is involved, That's the kind of prompt that you're not going to want to use. That's what you're fading. So getting him to like talking because he likes talking, because you're talking about the things that he likes talking about. That's how you start to fade away the prompts and say the words that are going on in his mind. But motor planning issues, like if you're using prompts for a cue to get things going, or like an initial consonant deletion, like, you know, like if you're trying to cue it while you're talking, my recommendation is that you hold those cues for structured speechy time. So if your child is already used to doing a little worksheet drill time, it's the difference between when you're learning to play the piano, the scales, da na 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 na, over and over again, which you need to do the motor planning for your fingers, and actually putting it together to look at music and play a song. So while you are learning to do those things, while natural language facilitation, saying the right words are going to be when you are in your natural daily activities, riding in the car, getting dressed, that kind of stuff. But when you are sitting at the table to work on initial consonant deletion, and you've got your words, you're trying to do your pop, you know, those kinds of things, and you're using a tactile cue, that reserves for that mom's the speech therapist time, our homework time. It's like the drill work stuff. But you should actually avoid that kind of speech work at all until your child is spontaneously using 3 to 4 word phrases on their own. You don't want to be facilitating developing more language or longer phrases or natural talking and correcting articulation at the same time. You're going to notice the issues, because if you're in my program, I teach you to watch for patterns, but make a note. And as he gets talking more, then that's when, you know, potentially you would get more strategies for specific articulation. You can talk to your speech therapist about those things, and that's your homeworky time. That's the articulation part of it. So hopefully that should help. All right, Nicole says, Jack's a little storyteller now, or Brianna says that, and Nicole says, thanks so much for this. Good. My son's 3 and he's still not talking as he should. He is in speech therapy already, but this is so helpful and informative. Good. Nicole, just because your child's going to speech therapy doesn't mean that you don't need to be doing language facilitation. Speech therapy does not replace language facilitation. Language facilitation must happen for all late talkers, and it must happen from parents, because you see your child all the time. You see them when they fall and bump their knee. You see them when they have a nightmare. You see them when they miss you, you know, all of that. That's when you need to communicate all that stuff. Speech therapy never going to see it. They're going to make every session fun and happy and playing toys and try to get your kid to talk. And they may learn talk behaviors there, but their only way they're going to learn natural language facilitation is from you as parents. So Giri says, I think I said your name right, and I think you're in Africa. My son's 15 years now. He's echolalic and lacks expressive language, but he can master a whole song and words and voices I don't understand. Giri, this is exactly what I was talking about that echolalia. Your son is using that talking as a 15-year-old as entertainment, stimming. You probably understand some of it to mean some things, but he is set using nonverbal communication patterns that those words have nothing to do with. So if you don't listen to what he says and you watch what he does, that's how you will know the words to tell him that he needs to say. But if he's 15, he's in a big habits of using this nonverbal communication. So, you know, you need to have very consistent positive language facilitation strategies in place for older late talkers, and you need to really, really, really avoid any kind of exchange-based prompting, because at 15, it is 100% about the reward. Your child's not learning anything. Your child, I'm going to say it again, your child's not learning any new language from you when there's an exchange involved. It's not functional language, except for the fact that that thing is called that thing. But they don't know how to use it other places. They don't know how to use it other ways. And by the way, if you haven't joined my Language Facilitation Basics program, it is the step-by-step process to teach you how to do the analysis to figure out why your child is late talking, to figure out what you're doing that's blocking your child, what the therapy's doing that's blocking your child, what your child is doing to block themselves from verbal speech. You're going to find all that stuff as you do my course, and you're going to be able to understand how to facilitate language instead of the things that you're doing to block your child. You're going to understand how to stop doing what's blocking them and how to do what opens what I call the gates, the floodgates, because as soon as you provide the right kind of facilitation for language, your kids want to talk. They'll learn it. It's so much easier for them to use this, to use words than these behaviors. So much easier. And nobody likes those behaviors. Your child doesn't like to bite and kick and scream to communicate. Nobody likes that behavior. It doesn't feel good to them, but they don't know how to use anything else. So you have to teach them. You're the only ones. You're the only ones. Nicole says, yes, because I tried different things with him, but sometimes I may not be doing it right for him, but I'm trying to change it up and do it to get the exchange verbally from him. So I hope I can help him more. That's my worry. Follow his lead, and you'll get it. That's great. So mostly he does his communication non-verbally. Of course he does, because he's not a confident verbal talker. But he does follow certain instructions from me. Of course he does, because he understands everything you say. He just doesn't know how to use the words, right? So you want to ask him to close the door, he does it. Pick up something, he will. So you should join my program, Nicole. I'm telling you, literally, if your kiddo has good receptive language, they're brilliant. They're listening. They just don't know how to use those words. And it really is easy to teach them because they want to learn so badly. They do. Like I said, they don't want to use these tantrums to communicate like that. They want to be able to talk to you. So, all right, everybody, I've been at this for 36 minutes. I'll give it a couple more minutes. I just want to let you know one more time, if you are interested in my program, if you want to know how to do this, most of the parents who are in the positions like you guys are talking about, their kids understand them. The criteria are easy. The child has to have working ear, nose, and throat, right? You have to be able to hear. You have to be able to have your throat, clear. You have to be able to see faces, right? So you have to have that. And it doesn't matter even what your attention level is, as long as you have that and your child has learned other things from you, like they can follow directions, you potty trained them, they know how to do little things, maybe they learned how to sing songs, they know how to learn, right? So your child definitely knows how to learn, and they're probably smarter than you even realize because they can't communicate it to you. The child has to want to communicate with you, and even if they're not using words, them dragging you around, pointing stuff, and having tantrums is communication. So most late talkers actually want to communicate, and the fourth criteria is the parent criteria. So those are the only three things a kiddo has to have: working ear, nose, and throat, be able to learn other things from you, and want to communicate, right? And then their mouth, like I said, their mouth just has to work. And even though neurological diagnoses go flying around there, if your child can eat, they probably can talk, okay? So as long as their mouth is working, that fourth criteria is a parent being willing to evaluate your situation honestly and understand what you're doing that could be blocking your child. Also evaluate your situation and figure out what the therapy is, because some people have their kids in ABA therapy that is exchange-based, and they're doing picture systems and they're doing sign language, and they say, no, your child won't talk without this. And the truth is, your child may not talk or say words without those prompts, but that's not language. That's just talking. So behavior, ABA, to teach language, teaches kids talking as a behavior. It's behavior training. Speech therapy teaches kids to use words, and it teaches kids to apply words and use vocabulary, but at the very basics, it teaches kids to say words, and it uses prompts to get kids to do it. So there are reward baits to get kids to do it, but hopefully, your speech therapist is teaching your child to use language as a communication tool and not a behavior in exchange to get a reward. So your speech therapy shouldn't be all reward-based. In fact, it should be very little reward-based. Yes, your child gets a reward for finishing a game or playing a whatever, but they shouldn't have to say a word to get a thing, ever, in therapy, ever, because that's prompt-based, all right? So that's how you know the difference. And if that's going on, then yeah. So, all right. So, and Brianna says, Nicole, that's how her little guy started out. He loves following directions, and they work that into their speech facilitation. So, all right. So great. Thanks for everybody for joining me. Hopefully this was helpful, and I talk to you a little bit more. Go out and try this week, everybody who's watching. Do a little language facilitation. Just kind of give up your pretense of whatever your speech therapist told you to do and just start saying the words you think your kid is thinking, because you know what they're thinking. You're guessing anyway, right? They're communicating non-verbally. So just start saying those words out loud in little phrases and see what happens this week. And if you are watching on the replay and you have a little guy and you want to run your scenario by me, just like these folks did today, join me next week, Thursdays, 2 p.m. here on my Waves of Communication page. Hopefully we'll have more and more people joining every week. And yeah, like this video, share it with your friends, and I'll see you all next week. Oh, by the way, also, just so you know, in addition to my weekly Q&A, I do 2 other videos a week. I do a wave of the week where I give you some information, kind of like I did today, about what kind of things cause late talking, what kind of blockages parents have, what kind of blockages kids have, things like that. And then I do a weekly video with what I call language facilitation tools for parents, which I actually describe and then demonstrate how to do these language facilitation strategies with your kiddos. And like Brianna, there's tons and tons of parents out there. I've been doing these videos for a year now, and there's lots of parents out there who have seen improvement in their kids' verbal speech just from using the strategies in my videos. So YouTube, you can check me out on YouTube. There's 160 videos there. There's tons here on my Facebook. You can go into the playlists on my Waves of Communication Facebook page. I also have a group, Language Facilitation Resources for Parents. That way, if you join the group, you'll see all of the posts that I put every day, new infographics with resources and links and things for you to consider as you accept the role as your child's language facilitator, because it's my mission to help as many parents as possible do just that. Understand that your child can't learn their natural speech and language without you. So you have to dig in and become their language facilitator. All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining me. I'll see you all next week on my next live Q&A. Have a great weekend.